Great. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, I have with me two incredible guests named Jade and Matilde, and they are coworkers from when I had just moved from the States from Portland, Oregon. I started working in postpartum with breastfeeding, complications after birth, and in Malmö, third biggest city in Sweden, I was really wanting a break from birth and really wanted to focus more on the postpartum period because you get to do it as a doula a bit, but I wanted to kind of deep dive into that a little bit more and take a little bit more of that responsibility. And so, yeah, then I met these two lovely women, and you can both, whoever wants to start, introduce yourselves and who you are and how you came to be working in postpartum in Malmö.
Okay, should I go first? Okay, well, my name is Jade, and I'm a nurse and doula, and I started working at the postpartum ward right away, as soon as I could, because I always knew I wanted to be a midwife. So I started that path as soon as I possibly could. So I've been working at the postpartum ward for about 2.5 years now, with pregnancy and birth complications, a lot of breastfeeding, and with a few side projects and extra responsibilities with equal rights to care and against discrimination, and also with pregnant people with special circumstances. So pregnant people with problems with addiction, and pregnant people have been exposed to a lot of violence and a lot of mental illnesses. So it's kind of been my specialty thing while being at the postpartum ward. And I met Matilde and Alison shortly thereafter.
Yeah, Matilde, what about you? How did you end up in postpartum? What led you there?
Well, firstly, I was working as a nurse assistant at the Children's Hospital for quite a while. While I was studying, and I studied both for a nursing degree, and I also took a pause to get a bachelor in creative writing. So during that time, I was working at the Children's Hospital, both in an oncological department and cardiac disease, and also with eating disorders. And so when I graduated from nursing school, I started working at the cardiac department for about 1.5 years. And then I had my daughter, and I decided that I wanted to work with healthy children, and I got more interested in like the healthy parts of the care that we gave. And then I started working at the postpartum ward and met you guys. Mm-hmm. So that was my journey towards it. But I think that I have always been considering becoming a midwife, and it's always something that I've been very interested in. So yeah, I think I'm going to stay in that lane.
Oh, yeah, you two are such an inspiration. I remember moving there and just like finding you two almost directly of like, you just feel there's that passion of, yes, women's health, but all birthing people just having a healthy and positive experience while they're at the hospital. And I think for me, it's one of my biggest passions is like if someone's in my care, I want them to really feel comfortable and to feel confident before they go home. And I felt that you two also were so in alignment with that. And yeah, we can speak a little bit. I kind of trained you both to become doulas as well because you both were interested in becoming midwives. And I always was, oh, if you become a doula first, like those are the best midwives I've ever met because you learn a whole nother side than you never do in midwifery school or medical school at all. And it's more on that emotional and physical level. And it taught me so much. And so, yeah, I know you two are up and running now in Malmö, and just shout out to BirthJam and you two ladies. I'm just so proud of how much you've accomplished in just such a short time, and looking forward to all the places that you go, and following your journeys in becoming midwives because the world needs more incredible midwives. So I just wanted to really focus on today about what it's been like working in postpartum because I was only there barely a year before I went on my own maternity leave, but you two were there longer. And just to kind of dive deep into the hospital systems in Sweden, the care that a lot of birthing people have experienced in our care, and yeah, all the pros, all the cons, wherever you two feel like you want to start.
Maybe I'll just start from the beginning then, because when I first started looking for jobs, I wanted something as close to the midwifery field as I could get to. And when I interviewed for the postpartum ward, I was, told about how we were going to work as midwives, and we were going to learn from midwives, and midwives were going to teach us, and they were going to be with us, alongside with us, so we could use them to bounce ideas off of and consult. So it's like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I want. This is exactly the job I need. And then I started at the postpartum ward, and there are no midwives. That was like my first thought. Like, where are the midwives that you promised to me that I was going to learn from, that I was going to work with, that were going to shape me into becoming, a good midwife? But they weren't there. I think that was my initial shock when coming to the postpartum ward. And as time went along, I kind of see, the bad things about it, and how I also understand it, and that there are good things too. But that was like my initial shock coming to the Swedish postpartum system, that there aren't midwives where they're supposed to be.
What about you, Matilda? Did you feel any type of way when you started there? Did you have any expectations that weren't met?
Well, what I think my expectations were, since while I was working at the cardiac ward for children, we took care of a lot of newborns there because they usually have to have surgery straight away or intensive care before they get surgery. And what struck me there was how little people knew about breastfeeding and how much it was underestimated. Like, they would encourage mothers to breast pump, but that was about it. And then I think most of it was like up to the mom if she wanted to breast pump or not. And I had also difficulty with like getting help and assistance from other colleagues there if I wanted to help someone with breastfeeding and so on. And also how like we only took care of the sick babies, of course, but often there were also recently postpartum mom there that had recently given birth, and it was quite difficult to combine her care while she was with us. And so I was interested in that part, and I think I learned a lot, taking care of like the entire family in the postpartum ward, and I kind of was interested in that, like seeing the family as a whole. but the difficult part is that the other partner can't stay usually, and they often don't have quite a big role. It's often like the care of the mothers and the babies that we focus on. So I think that we did better at the cardiac department or at the children's hospital. But yeah, and the breastfeeding, I think that it was quite interesting because when I began, I had a lot of practical knowledge after having my daughter, and we had quite a difficult breastfeeding journey, so I learned a lot on that. And I was looking forward on learning more, but it was like science and evidence was not like the most ruling thing there in care. It was mostly about like what people think or thought or what their beliefs were or how much time they got. So I had to like teach myself most of it or read separately, or like if I was told something, I always like try to find sources and evidence, but that I had to do on my own. So I decided to do a course at university on breastfeeding in order to be able to provide like accurate information to the parents. And I think that is mostly because there aren't so many midwives as Jade was telling us, and the knowledge that is gained often just comes from like people speaking to each other, and it's not always what is like evidence proof.
Yeah, I agree with both of you because when I came there, I was shocked, honestly, that first that barely any midwives that work there. Yes, we know there's a lack of midwives in Sweden and in the world. However, they're not working in postpartum. And honestly, for me as a doula, I've helped hundreds of families with breastfeeding. I've done certain courses, but I felt like I came there and it's like no one knew anything about breastfeeding or how to size for these different flanges when you're pumping and how crucial that is, and how it can make or break someone's experience. And I felt like there were a lot of people that were set in their ways, didn't want to learn anything new, and we weren't being sent on like educational opportunities or growth or just to expand in the areas of passion that we have. And honestly, the midwives I've worked with, even in labor and delivery in Sweden, they don't know a lot about breastfeeding either. You know, it is such a deep dive and such a specialty that really, really needs to be that sole focus. Like there's certain things that midwives can touch on, but I still didn't feel like the midwives at the postpartum, I mean, some were very passionate, but some, it just wasn't like an area that they really cared to really support with. It was a lot more of the medical. And yeah, I just felt like there was just a lack of people that were really passionate about breastfeeding when I was working in postpartum. And yeah, it's incredibly sad, but it's also an area of, you know, there's an opportunity for growth there. But I don't even know where we would begin with something like that, because I feel like all birthing people deserve the best help with breastfeeding, and that's the place where they should be getting it the most in the hospital, especially when there's been a complication or some, you know, addiction or just any of those that we get there need that extra attention, and how we're just low staff. But yeah, it was really an eye opener to why you two were so special as well, of like wanting the best and wanting to learn and do separate educational things at universities, because yeah, I wish that more people knew what to expect when they have a baby at the hospital, and the care that you're going to get is really going to be dependent on who you get.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think also that like a part of the problem is also that the midwifery care in Malmö or Sweden is becoming more and more medical, and the birth itself is becoming more like doctor-led. So since it's a doctor leading the birth, the midwives are becoming kind of like more a nurse to the doctor. And then what a doctor sees is like risks and diseases and what could happen. So birth itself becomes something that is very hospitalized instead of being like something very natural. And I think that's also why breastfeeding is starting to be like less and less important for the care uh, of the babies and the mothers. And I see often that like the pediatrical doctors want to give this formula instead because they can measure it, they can see how much the baby gets, and in a weird way they send signals that the formula is more it's better, which is also very contradictory to evidence.
I also think that stems from like a systematic problem, actually, more than individually a problem, because I've spoken to a lot of midwives, and when you talk to them, they want to help with breastfeeding and they want to be supportive emotionally and physically, and no midwife wants to do anyone any harm, and they don't want it to be a medical event. But when you are overly worked, you have too many patients per midwife, you don't have the resources that you need, in particularly time, to give the care that you wish you could, things get down prioritized, and then it becomes a matter of what's life-saving and what is more for the experience. And then life-saving matters become more important. They get prioritized, and which is quite like a natural way to think that way, I think. And it's very clear in the postpartum war that postpartum care is down prioritized in Sweden, is my point of view on it, because the few midwives that are left in the healthcare system that haven't been run down to the ground yet, they are in the delivery wards, and they do help with birth because that's where they have to be. And then there are no midwives left over for the postpartum ward. And the doctors are in the delivery ward. They don't know the names of the staff in the postpartum ward. They don't know who the patients are there. And postpartum and breastfeeding becomes very low prioritized, and it gets left to newly graduated nurses that want to become midwives, but they get thrown into doing a job that they don't actually have the education to do yet. And they don't get support in doing that. They don't get the education, the on-work side education to do that. So everything just kind of, gets left behind in postpartum care. And that's sad because it's a sacred moment when you've just become a family. You're supposed to be bonding and, feeling safe and, start out life as your family. And it's kind of left up to your patients or their families themselves because we have to prioritize differently. And I think that's a bit sad because I don't think midwives chose that or obstetricians chose that. I think they were forced into a system that made them have to think that way.
Yeah. Well, I agree so much. There's many issues. There's so much to thrive, to just strive for, to be better. And I do think that Sweden being such a progressive country, that people go in with a certain expectation that they're going to be completely taken care of in labor and delivery. They trust the hospital staff so much. They're like, we'll just do what you say. I see a lot of that. Many people haven't prepared for birth and they just are relying completely on the staff. Same with breastfeeding. They haven't done a course. They haven't talked to anybody. We aren't in that community. life anymore where we're seeing women breastfeed throughout our lives and just being in that anymore. We're very isolated. And so, just like you're saying, Jade, you're coming into postpartum, this sacred moment of becoming parents, and you are having so many emotions, and you have this little baby that you have to take care of, and you're expecting these staff to come in and just be there for you 100% and help you with everything, when it's not a reality. And I feel like that's not only where all of our patients can be better at advocating for themselves, of like, this is what I want, this is what I'm expecting, but I think also they shouldn't have to. It should be like, we are this progressive country, and we're supposed to be one of the leading in the world when it comes to birth and outcomes and breastfeeding outcomes. And already in postpartum, we see so many people just give up on breastfeeding before they even go home. And it's devastating, and it's not talked about enough. I think the word needs to be spread more of, setting their expectations when giving birth at a hospital.
I also think that with the induction culture that we are living in, women are more tired when they get to the postpartum ward because they have been in delivery for several days. There are usually a lot of complications and a lot of like medication that affects both the mother and the baby. The baby is much more tired. We have high C-section rates, which also makes the babies more tired. And all of this delays the breastfeeding start. It's quite, for me, I also find it quite difficult to pressure a mom that comes to us like at 3 o'clock in the morning, in the middle of the night, and has just like been in for an induction for 3 days, and then it's a C-section, and then I have to be like, now you have to start breastfeeding, and it's very important to start right away. And I think that also makes it complicated. And as Jade was telling us before, as a nurse or a midwife, you have to prioritize. And often in the postpartum ward, the medication is the most important thing, since women are getting more and more sick also, I find, after giving birth. And then we also have, of course, the reason that we have IVF, etc. So women that could never give birth before can now give birth, but with more complications, etc. So there is a lot of like clinical workload that prevents us from giving the breastfeeding care, and then that gets like that workload is going to be taken care of by a nurse assistant. And a lot of nurse assistants haven't studied breastfeeding at all, or comes from like taking care of elders, and then they change job to working in the postpartum, and maybe they get like half a day of lecture before starting. And what I find difficult is that like the lectures we got when we were starting to work at the postpartum ward that were about breastfeeding, they were very, very basic. And they were all like talking about a perfectly healthy woman with regular sized breasts and perfect nipples and a very healthy baby that was like wide awake from the start. And I was asking for like more complicated examples, like how do we help a woman that recently had a C-section breastfeed if she is in pain? Or we have sometimes patients that had bled a lot. How do we help them? But that wasn't like anything that was touched on. And then it's difficult to give advice to someone that's been through a very complicated birth when you only have like a healthy breastfeeding basic lesson in your background.
Yeah, It's important to know that when we talk about postpartum ward, we are talking about the department that deals with pregnancy and delivery complications, and it's not the healthy postpartum part like baby family or home care from baby postpartum, because those are very different from the postpartum ward. Because the other ward, your odds are stacked against you when you come in there as a new parent, you've just given birth, you've had your complications, the staff is new, you don't get to have your partner there. The odds are against you, and it becomes an uphill battle from start. And it's not supposed to be that way when you've just started a family. You're not supposed to be fighting your way to keep your head above water. But at the postpartum ward, that is a lot of the experiences is that way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's really, really sad. Yeah, I feel like there's just I just wanna just I don't even know. I want to improve the whole system as a whole. And I mean, I don't know how that could start or where that could start unless we have really good leadership, like really good leadership from the beginning,
Mm.
have super passionate people that work there. And how do we find those people? Like, how do we improve the postpartum ward in Sweden, in the complication and breastfeeding world? Do you two have any, like, where if you were to be elected the new boss, like, what would you change? Where would you start? And yeah, you can both share just kind of your visions of like what you wish it would look like.
Unfortunately, I think that the bosses don't have much power right now. They are very restricted by the budget and the economical issues. So it's more of a political question more than anything. It's a political question where we need to have politicians that want to prioritize women's health and prioritize healthcare. Because there is less and less money left in healthcare. There are the organizations are quite faulty. It's a lot of administration, a lot of random bosses of bosses working with the bosses, and you don't really know what they are all doing, and the money doesn't go down to the people working on the floor. So in order to make it better, you have to make the workplace attractive and pay people what they deserve. And that's up to the politicians.
Yeah, so it needs to start there. But also, if in an ideal world, if the policies were perfect and the budget was unlimited, postpartum status needs to be raised. Because I feel like I can't speak for Sweden in general when it comes to this, because this is my own experience at the postpartum ward in which I work, that even as a very, very few midwives that we have, that even they are down prioritized compared to midwives at different departments in the building. So if, all of the policies were great, we had the budget, we need to raise the status of postpartum care. Because what I see when I see midwives, or postpartum midwives interacting with doctors or delivery midwives, is that they are looked down upon. Like, well, if you're a midwife, why don't you work with delivery? That's what you're supposed to do when you're a midwife. That's the real midwifery care, or however they want to phrase it. And that's a big thing to why a lot of people leave postpartum, that they're not prioritized. They have to work upwind or downwind, maybe it's called, and they have to fight for everything because that little budget that we do have gets put to the delivery ward, or the budgets that we have get so that they get new equipment and new resources, and we don't have the equipment or the resources, or they get the educational days and get sent to conferences and we don't get sent to conferences and have all of that extra on work education. Or things like that. And I just think like postpartum word needs to become more appreciated, needs to become more of a status thing. So if ideally, if I were to become a boss one day, which I'm not going to be, and I got a politician that gave me an unlimited budget, that's where the fight would start, I think.
Yeah, and I think that that goes back to saying like how we really need to put it in also more of the parents' hands, because it is such an uphill battle of, you're going against politicians and bosses that can't do anything with, they're not given enough resources, that it really needs to come back to the people of, again, realistic expectations of this is what it is like, and you need to advocate for yourself. You need to educate yourself. You need to know your choices. Like, I feel like that all needs to start like with the midwifery care people get before they give birth, because I feel like you're just during pregnancy, you're going to your midwife and she's, measuring your belly, she's checking your blood, but there's no real talk about like, have you thought about a birth plan, or have you thought about what you're going to do postpartum? Do you have a plan? And for them to already kind of maybe start really setting those realistic expectations for their city or town or wherever they are, of what the status is right now. Because that's where I feel like people need to take more responsibility. It's your experience in the end. You are going to be remembering this for the rest of your life. For hospital staff, you're just one more person in a bed that they're trying to get to the next place. And you can really feel that with some doctors and some midwives also, where it's like just there to do a job, where it's really important, I think, for people to understand that this is really, they're also really responsible for asking the right questions and demanding good care and demanding like maybe presence as much as possible, in that limitation that it can go. But I feel like it really is because we have such a long way to go to fix the system that it needs to start with education with the parents. But I don't know what you two think about that. Is that too much to put on a person nowadays? Is that like just too much?
I think it's quite, or you can start.
I mean, I think it is too much. I, however, think that's necessary. I think it should be less. I don't think you should have to have that much responsibility, that you should have to educate yourself and become your own doula slash midwife. But that's how the system looks now, where you need to become your own healthcare advocate. And I think that if people knew how much responsibility was on their shoulders, how much the system has made it that way, that maybe people would, consider what they want from their healthcare system and affect policies and, think about what they vote for in the healthcare system and what they want their resources to go to, etc., to affect change. That if they know that, they are the starting point for change.
But I think it's quite difficult to ask someone that is like in the care. Like maybe you can affect things when you're not pregnant and like very affected of all your feelings, and when you're pregnant you just want to go through this amazing experience, and when you're giving birth you are in a position where it's very difficult to speak up for yourself at all times, and for the partner it's often like the first time they are witnessing a birth, so they are quite carried away by emotions, and invested in like how their partner is doing, and I think that's quite difficult to speak up for themselves at that time. And what I also find is that even if you speak up for yourself, there is a culture where you are not allowed to have too much opinions of your care in the birth. I read like a Facebook status, a Facebook post from a midwife working in Malmö a couple of months ago, and she was like, firstly, she was like complaining about the workload, as always, during the summers. But what struck me was that she trusted the system. It was like nothing was wrong with the system. The only thing that was wrong was like the budget, or that we need more midwives. But the system was perfect according to her. And instead she started like complaining about how difficult it is to be understaffed and then receiving patients that have birth plans with like and she talked about the birth plans and described them as like, you're coming in to the hospital with a menu, like, I want onions, but I don't want gluten, and I would like this, but I don't want this. And she was like, you can't just pick and choose. And that was like, so I think that was quite clear how it mostly spoke about the culture, like the work culture at the hospitals and how patients are seen. And I could relate a lot as a patient when I gave birth to my daughter, and I did my hypnobirthing and I read my books and I was like super nerdy and I wrote my birth letter. And I got there, I gave them my birth letter, and I like could feel them sigh and be like, oh, this is one of those with the special menu. And there were a lot of situations where I said no, and that wasn't accepted. It wasn't like they forced through, or they did once, but there was a lot of convincing and threatening, and that is very hard to stand against when you are in middle of your birth and you just want your baby to be fine. You are in pain and you don't want to be worried, but you are starting to get worried because they are making you get worried about how everything is proceeding. And like and it's also difficult. My husband, he was also very affected by how I was doing. So for him, it was very difficult to speak up, and he tried several times, but then they were just like getting more and more angry at us, like we were children, like misbehaving. And I think that is because in Sweden, there is such a big trust to the system. Like you just have to leave your faith in the system's hands and it's going to get perfect. And it's almost like if you go into birth with your own wishes or preferences, it's like they get like personally offended. Like, aren't we giving you the best care? We know best. We know best. And you don't know anything. And I think it's, you have to like see the difference between like if you would get care for a disease, of course I can't come and say I want this medicine but not this, and maybe this one, and you can mix it with that one, but you can't like compare that with something that is completely healthy and that involves you giving birth, which is something that you have to do on your own with your own body.
Yeah, I think we because when I say you need to be your own advocate, doesn't mean you should be. You shouldn't have to be, but you need to be, and that's very difficult to do. Because I actually had a conversation like with some coworkers at work, and I got a little bit heartbroken because I couldn't believe that this was their idea of the system, and that to them this was completely normal, like completely acceptable. It wasn't anything weird at all, because we were having a conversation during report, and I got a report about a patient, and then I just casually said, oh, I think it's too bad that, more people don't choose the other option. And I also said, but I get that they're not presented as options. And the midwife looked at me like, but you're not allowed to do that. And I'm like, why are you not allowed to do that? Of course you're allowed to. You're allowed to do whatever you want to your body. And I explained to her that if a doctor comes to you when you have some kind of complication, or they have some recommendation and they say, this is what we're planning for, That's very different from them saying we can either do this and these are the pros and cons, or we can do this and these are the pros and cons. Those are two very different conversations, but you always have options. And then the nursing assistant asked, but are you really allowed to decide that yourself? Isn't someone supposed to decide that for you? And my heart just kind of broke. Like, you work within this system. Do you really think you don't have options, that you don't have a right to choose how your birthing experience is going to be, how your healthcare is going to work, what people are going to do to your body? Do you really believe you don't have the right to make a decision, that you're not allowed to decide for yourself? And that's because there's a like a cultural environment that says that a patient's wishes is extra. It's bothersome for me to have to take those into consideration, or like the special menu that Matilda is talking about, because we have a culture where we look at your rights, your integrity, like special requests on the menu. And that's just horrible.
Mm-hmm. That is, oh, you two, you blow me away. I just get so amped up when I talk to you two because I'm just like, guys, what are we gonna do? Because it's where it comes in, having worked in America for so long, and being a doula in a city that has hundreds of doulas. Like, almost every family goes into a doula, and it's not because it's some woo-woo crazy thing. It's because people have read the evidence on doulas, and they know that hospital systems have their menus or their guidelines, or they have their way of practicing with everybody. This is what we give to everybody. This is what we do for everybody. And they put you in this little box, and people have at least a knowledge that they know that because they know they're vulnerable, they know they can't speak up for themselves. They don't want to put that on the partner either, because it's their experience too. This is a huge transformation for both parents going through this. And they want to invest in having the most positive experience. And that is what it's all about in the end. And I think that we want so much is that you need to know your options. You just need to know that, oh, hey, you're coming in and you're 4 centimeters, and we want to break your waters to keep you in labor if you're going to stay, or something like this. And you're like, okay, but actually a doula would come in and be like, hey, so here are some things we could also try that you also could do. And I think that just having that other person that knows the system, knows how we work as a system and as a culture, and having that advocate in the room that has nothing to do with you medically, that's in the hospital's hands. Absolutely. If there's a medical concern, we're going to trust, but we're going to ask for our options and our alternatives, because like you're saying, Jade, like, we always have options. Like, there's never this is the one and only way, unless it's an ultra emergency situation in a healthy patient. So I feel like that's where I got so excited when you two were also open to being doulas, because when I came here from a city that has such a huge doula culture, and a lot of hospitals, oh, this person's coming in with a doula. I mean, it's still there. You still feel tension. You're like, oh, okay, they're going to do things their way. And maybe, and for a lot of people and a lot of staff, I think they're very grateful because they don't have the time or the patience to be with that person the whole time. Many are glad they have a doula, but also they know that, okay, the whole hospital, everyone that's working knows that there's a doula in the room, and they're gonna be asking questions, and hard questions, but that are very realistic questions, and having this patient have autonomy over their own body and what's happening to them. And so you two becoming doulas before midwives and being in that role and not needing to be in a medical role, I think is just so exciting. And it's been really hard sometimes to be that person in the room that has to come up with, be like, oh, well, we have rights. There are rights. This person has rights. And to be that voice has been really hard sometimes, but it's always been like, wow, like, there's never a regret from someone that has had a doula with them with their birth that they went like, oh, I wish our doula wasn't there. It's usually a very positive experience so that you're fully informed on everything that's happening to you, your baby, your body, the whole time. It's nothing, we're not trying to fight the hospital system. We're just trying to change people's experiences for the better, and how we need so many more doulas in this country. I'm glad it's getting more popular, but it's like it needs to happen. People need to know about it more. And I guess that goes back to another culture question of paying for something out of pocket.
Mm.
I actually read that people in and it's very like people in Sweden, they pay more for their wedding than for their birth.
Mm.
And that's that says a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That you are willing to pay more for just having a good party. It's of course a beautiful union, but if you compare it to the day when you're giving birth, that you don't want to spend money on that day compared to the wedding is quite astounding.
I think that we've kind of downplayed birth in Sweden. Like it's a thing, it's a medical event that everyone just has to do. But it's not. Birth is so much more. And we downplayed it to where it becomes something like, well, I should get that free through the healthcare system. And you should, but you're not going to. So you need to invest that yourself. Because like Alison said, we're not fighting the medical system. We work within the medical system. We appreciate the medical system for all that it can do, because when we need it, it's there. But we're trying to add to the system. We're adding support. We're adding continuous support. We're adding the emotional stability in the environments. Those are just add-ons that can improve your outcomes so drastically. And it's become downplayed because they're not considered necessities. And no, they aren't considered necessities, but they are amazing privileges to have. And we live in a country where we should be able to have those privileges, where we don't need to talk only in terms of necessity. But we can say, I want it to be amazing. And instead of saying, I just want to be healthy, because we hear that a lot, right? That
I want the baby to survive.
I want me and the baby to survive. And that's bare minimum for you and the baby to survive. That's just bare minimum. You should have higher goals and standards for yourself than just to survive something that is supposed to be absolutely amazing and beautiful experience.
Especially when there is so much evidence that show how much birth affects you for the rest of your life.
Mm.
So how much that event will be with you for the rest of your life, and then you can use that for something better. And if you take control of it, then birth can be something that you carry with you, and that makes you feel stronger and more capable, and something that you want to celebrate, instead of being something that you carry with you as something traumatic, and that makes you feel useless, or something that can be caused by someone deciding over your body.
Mm-hmm. I also think that doulas can add to, even if something might not have the best results, for it to be a positive experience either way. Like even if it turns out to be an emergency C-section, or even if you do tear or something else, that you can appreciate everything around it because you were well informed. You got to participate in your care. You got to feel independence and strength and empowerment. And those things can turn a birth that maybe wasn't perfect to something that still wasn't a good experience. And we shouldn't just forget about that important factor just because it's not a necessity. And I think the doulas are rising because we are, getting closer to prioritizing that too. We're not quite there yet, but we're moving forward slowly. But I notice when you talk to coworkers, they don't even know what a doula is in Sweden. And when you describe it, like they really get to talk to you about it, they realize like, you know what, that's just an asset, because I would like to do that for my patients, but I can't do that anymore. And I've talked to a lot of coworkers that will admit that that just sounds like an additional asset for them, because they have so much other things to do.
I wonder though if it's about like that self-value of our culture in Sweden. Like, am I worthy a doula? Or if it's more like, I don't need a doula. Like me and my partner, we want to do this together, because otherwise, if we don't do this together, we're not strong. Or if it is more of a thing, well, that it's some kind of high, yeah, high priority, or I don't know, like I wonder like culturally, like what makes people like hesitate to that they're not deserving of that kind of care, or that they don't. Yeah, I'm just thinking.
I think there could be both involved in that, and I think that like firstly, it's people are very private and think that this is something you do only with your partner, and then you have the fantastic healthcare system that you trust and that will solve everything, because that is also what many people's birth plans are. I trust the healthcare, and I read that in journals, like or in the medical journals very often. I trust the healthcare and that they will do what is best for me. And then they bring their partner and nothing else. And I think that it's something like it's about like they are very private and just want to do it with their partner. But yeah, because I think that the Swedish people are very prone to like buying a lot of stuff for their babies. So it's not like, I wouldn't call it a money issue necessarily, because I have friends and I have seen it on like Facebook groups for moms, like the long buying lists and how people choose like the more expensive stuff without blinking, and they buy everything new, and they are preparing with a lot of material stuff. And like the discussions sometimes that are going on in the mom groups on Facebook is like, what kind of shoes should I wear for the postpartum ward? Could you link, could you link some nice pair of shoes? Or
That
like,
I posted on my Instagram. I gotta look gorgeous.
yeah, yeah, and it's like, it's more a discussion of those things than like, how are you handling your fears or thoughts for birth?
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's because we don't think that it's a necessity. Like you things become easier. Everything else that you trust to the healthcare system are things that you think are a necessity, but everything else just kind of gets left behind.
But like buying a brand new Bugaboo pram in collaboration
Isn't a
with
necessity.
Blade is not a necessity.
It's a simple way to feel control. I think that matters, because control, people's need to feel control, that weighs heavy. You can control a shopping list, you can check all the boxes, and you feel like I've done my list, everything's in order, I've packed everything. Because
And
those
like it's the
control.
right brands. It has to be like the correct brands.
Yeah. But I think also, we don't talk a lot about birth in Sweden. Like in general, we don't talk about it. Like people don't share their birthing stories as much. And that's like a societal cultural thing, because it's like Matilda said, it's a very private matter. But it's honestly not going to be that much of a private matter, because you are going to have midwives and doctors that change shifts. There are going to be so many people involved in your birth. It isn't going to be solely a private matter. Because I remember when we started the doula thing, and someone asked her, but I don't want, or said, I think someone said to
Yeah,
a stranger at my birth,
I
like, you're
went for
gonna,
dinner with a couple of friends, and they were like really curious about what a doula does. and all of them like had given birth before, and many of them could like tell quite traumatic stories about it. But they were still like very suspicious to the whole doula thing, like asking, or yeah, saying like, I don't want a person I don't know in the room when I'm giving birth. And I was like, yeah, but all the midwives and the nurse assistants and the doctors are going to be people you don't know, and they're going to.
And then when you get that birth plan letter that says, I trust the healthcare system and they're going to do what's best for me, that to me is like a nightmare, because I don't know you well enough to make decisions for you, because we are strangers. When we come into the room as nursing assistants, nurses, midwives, doctors, we are strangers, and we can't make the decisions for you. We don't know you well enough to do that. We don't know how you cope with pain, or how you cope with stress, or what makes you feel safe, or if you would rather have a short but intensely painful birth, or you're okay with having a prolonged birth. How do you feel about induction? We don't know what your pain tolerance is, and things. We don't know how your partner reacts to stress. We don't know what they need to feel safe. And so you are going to have strangers there, but having a doula insists that you make sure that you have someone that isn't a stranger. And having a birth plan makes sure that the staff knows something about you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like you get to know your doula before your birth, and it's someone that's with you the whole time. They're not switching shifts unless, you know, they have a backup doula because it's been like a very long birth, but usually met them also at least on a video call or something, that you kind of have a face, and they have your birth plan of the things that are important for your experience. And oh no, I love it so much. Like you two you're just changing the birth world in ways that I wish that more people could see. And it's why I feel like, you know, we find our people so fast when we work in this field, the ones that are passionate and things. And you two have been the whole time. Just two women I look up to so much, and I am so inspired by what you're doing and the hard work that you do, because I know, like, working against this system when it's like your heart is in on a level that people might not know of. You have so much bigger goals for this system, women and birthing people, that it's rare, and you are called to this field for a reason. And it's one person that can come into the room and change everything about that experience. And I know that the two of you do that every shift you work, that you change someone's lives. And I am excited as well, now being doulas, that you get to experience that in a whole different way of like leaving the medical behind. You're probably going to keep it there all the time, but trying to like let that go and just really sitting with the humanness of the birthing experience, because it is unlike anything else. And I hope that we as a culture can get to a place of knowing that we are worth the best, most empowering, most positive, incredible birth, no matter what happens, that we deserve that, and that we are in control of that. This culture that loves control, we have control of hiring someone to be that person for us, and so that we can let go of that control and just trust that this person has my back no matter what happens, and no matter how many shift changes we have to go through, and that they're going to be available postpartum too. This is another just huge thing that people don't think about. Like, doulas are with you postpartum too, to help breastfeeding if you want to breastfeed, pump, bottle feed, whatever it is that your goals may be, that we're so much more than just pregnancy and birth. And with all of your experience, I mean, anyone would be so lucky to have you on their team. And yeah, I'm just so grateful to both of you, and for your time. And is there anything else that you two would want to lift right now, or anything at all?
No.
No.
Thank you. And yeah, of course, that I am so happy that we met in your short time at the postpartum ward.
You hope you come back to us one day. Yeah.
At least to Malmö.
At least to Malmö. You could come back to Malmö. That would be amazing.
It would be amazing. I know we're just these people that just are very short term everywhere we go in life. And I am looking forward to kind of settling down, and we'll see where life takes us next summer. But yeah, I already miss the community and just yeah, being in Malmö. It's a very special place, and I feel like it's progressive and things are changing, and I'm excited to follow along how it all turns out. But yeah, for right now, I'm just grateful for your time, and I'm sure I'll have you on more times, Matilda, to speak about your birth, and Jade to speak about your midwifery journey you're about to start, like all of these things of that experience and what that's like. So I'm just looking forward to growing with the two of you.
Same. Thank you.
It'll be fun. We'll stick around together, no matter where we are, really.
Yeah.
We'll see each other.
Oh, all right. Thank you both so much, and we'll talk soon. Bye.
Bye.